Good morning to you. Grand rising, one and all. Are you receiving me? I sincerely hope you are. Hello, one and all. Ooh, it still says it's waiting. Why would that be? Oh, there we go. No, there we go. There we go. How are you all? Hello there, grand risings, one and all, to the whole family. Excuse me, I've started off with a dodgy throat already. Oh my goodness. Hello, Shalini, wonderful, wonderful. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. It is, of course, Monday, 9th of September, 2024. It's just gone 1 minute past 9. This is Wake Up with Sonia Poulton and guests. Ooh, is it loud and clear? Hearing you loud and clear. Maybe too loud and clear. Is that what you're saying? Hope not. Hope not. Good morning, lovely people, says Chris. Hello, Colin and Catherine and Heldu and Lydia. Lydia finally made it to a live. Woo! Good to hear it. And Jacqueline and Flickin and Maria. Good evening, Sonia and everyone. Maria, where are you? Just saying good evening. Where are you, my love? And John from Coventry. Oh, we are on day 6 of just a white sky in Coventry, feeling like purgatory. They are messing our weather around in the West Midlands and the rest of the world, unfortunately. John from Coventry. Hello, Shalini. Had work trip last week, which was exhausting. Got back Friday night late. But do you know what? Isn't it lovely though, Shalini? When you've had one of those weeks, right? And then when you get back, and I don't know what my thing is, I like a nice cold beer when I get back from those kind of big, work days. And but it is the absolute contrast, isn't it, between working really, really hard and then getting to rest. But if you weren't working really, really, really hard, you wouldn't enjoy that rest so much. And good morning to you, the Count of St. Germain. I received your lovely email. God bless you, darling. And hello, Jerry. Jerry, where is Ben or Medina? Where's Ben or Medina? I've literally never heard that place. Talk to me. And Maria, you're in Sydney, Australia. Ah, hello, London lady. How are you? And Synchronized Soul. And Craig Campbell is here, fresh off the plane from Spain. And Craig is getting excited when hearing beer, said Healing the Silence. I bet. Cold beer is the best, Randy. Oh my gosh, it so is. And yes, hello on a plane. And who else? It's so many. Katie, are you in Spain? Hello, Mark Colley. And say hello to our mods, everybody, of course. The lovely Zoe and Shin. How are you all? And yes, he was brilliant in the talent. That's quite funny. On a plane, my Chinese flatmate asked, have you seen my cocaine? Me, yes, he was brilliant in the Italian job. Michael Caine, get it? Get it? It's nice to be home, to be honest, says Shalini. It is, isn't it? Is your phone playing up, Choose Love? Malaga in Spain. Sorry, Jerry. Got ya. Greetings from Galway. Beautiful Galway. Beautiful. Morning all, says Jax. VW photo booth. Good morning to you. Wet and miserable here today. It's like autumn out there today. I can't actually believe what we're dealing with here. What are we dealing with here? So yes, how are you all? Is volume a bit low today? Is it? I'm hearing it, everybody saying it's loud and clear. Sunny in Wales. Choose Love. You've got us all jealous. Hi from cold, grey Scotland. Well, that's fabulous, isn't it? Yeah, well, it's cold and grey here, southwest London. It sure is. Right. What am I going to be bringing you today? Let me see. Still working with the new system, people. You know what it's like, right? So just bear with me. Okay, today we are going to be talking about the Thirlwell inquiry into the convictions of nurse Lucy Letby. We will also be looking at the Lampard inquiry into the numerous deaths of patients with mental health issues in Essex. It is, of course, the 23rd anniversary of 9/11 this week. And a big question, who is Charlotte Owen, aka Baroness Owen of Alderley Edge? And why does Boris Johnson seem to adore her so much? These are big questions, right? Big questions. And let's start, first of all, with the whole issue of axing the winter fuel allowance in the UK for elderly people. Now, the first, when Sir Keir Rodney Starmer first became Prime Minister, the first group he and his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, attacked were pensioners. They said they planned to axe the winter fuel allowance, but they said that let me say that again. They said that despite knowing it was a murderous policy, and yet this was their first cut. Wow. Why do I say that? Right. Well, so the elderly that were not taken out during Boris Johnson's C19 reign will be finished off by the Labour government, frankly. They are all the same. Yes, they are. Just a more enhanced, more punishing version as the years go on. And the reason that they knew this would be a problem for pensioners is they'd already conducted research into it. When Sir Keir Starmer sat in the shadow cabinet in 2017, Labour conducted research. It warned that Conservative plans to axe the winter fuel allowance to 10 million elderly voters would increase excess deaths by 3,850 that winter. So they knew it. They absolutely knew it. And Labour at that time called Theresa May's proposal, which was later abandoned, the single biggest attack on pensioners in a generation in our country. What astonishing hypocrisy, right? That was published during the 2017 election campaign. The research said since the introduction of the winter fuel payment by Labour in 1997, allowing for significant variation in winter weather, deaths among the elderly have fallen from around 34,000 to 24,000. Half of the almost 10,000 decrease in so-called excess winter deaths, the rise in mortality that occurs each winter between 2000 and 2012 was due to the introduction of the winter fuel allowance. So what does that mean then? You take it away and then you get those mortalities on your hands. This is awful. They knew, and yet they still did it. What are we to make of it? So the government's planned means testings will essentially leave 10.8 million out of the 12.3 million pensioners with no money before Christmas. That's what it will do. This week in the Lords, there will be a debate about it. The House of Lords have slammed it. And let us hope that they will block it, because that is surely the purpose of the House of Lords. It's absolutely horrendous. Crazy Bunny is pointing out, make sure chat set to all messages and not top chat, and hit that button, please. Absolutely. So this is fatal, what the government is proposing towards our elderly, right? Be under no illusion whatsoever. These people are not socialists, but we knew that, didn't we? Right? And anybody who wants to apply for that winter fuel allowance, by the way, they've got to work their way through an astonishing 243 question form, right? And if they have over £10,000 savings, including money hidden in their homes, they get a reduced form of pension credit. So it's really bad. There's an almighty delay going on, a 9-week delay. And what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves did is they've broken traditional consultation on this. And that really should probably tell you everything you need to know about these people. And so also, can I just say, good morning to HRH on X. She said, I stopped the direct debit for my TV licence. A letter arrived 3 days later telling me I needed a licence, etc. I responded that I didn't want any more of my money going into the coffers of paedophiles and assorted deviants at the BBC. Today, I received a cheque for £66. Big up yourself, HRH. This is what we like. We love this. I'm going to bring in my first guest. And then after that, let's start talking about this being an inquiry week. Very interesting week for inquiries. And, oh, by the way, just to say, I'm just looking for MPOX because it seems to have disappeared. I've got my magnifying glass out looking for it. It seems to have disappeared after we were told that this was an emergency. This is now our next pandemic. But where is it? Even my magnifying glass can't find it. Yes, Anne, they always come after the disabled. Sick and disabled. They always do. Right. Shall we bring in our first guest? I say we should. Let's hope this is going to work lovely. Lovely jubbly. Let us hope so. Now, I want... Oh! Let me see. I've lost my guest. Let me see. Oh! Naomi?
Hello, I can see you.
I can hear you and I can't see you, which is odd. So, but I can hear you, which is great. But
Great.
no sign of actually seeing you. Let's see what that does. No, that doesn't bring that up either. That's very, very odd. So, well, at least I've got your audio, if nothing else. Naomi, I should say to you, we're working with a new production system around here. So we're having all manner of teething pains, frankly. And let me just see what I can do regarding your video's on. Everything should be fine.
Yeah, everything should be working fine. I can see both of us on screen.
You can?
Yes.
Well, that is interesting because I can only see me. So if you can see both of us, I wonder if everybody else can. Everybody else out there in the chat, can you indicate to me if you can see Naomi? Can you? Can you indicate if you can see Naomi? Yeah, but we're too many buttons on the dash. You're absolutely right. I don't want to go back to the old system, people, because we have to progress. We have to move forward. Only see Sonia, it would appear, which is unfortunate. But Naomi, should we have our conversation anyway, right?
Yes.
Well, let's just see if this Zoom split will bring it for me. Nope. There you go. Let's have our conversation anyway. Everybody, I am delighted, even if you can't see her, if you've only got a voice, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Naomi Murphy. She is a consultant clinical forensic psychologist and a very sorted individual. Yes, my darling people in the chat, I know. Unfortunately, I don't know why I can't see Naomi. It's odd. It is actually odd. There's no reason. It's not giving me any reason on the screen why that is. So we should just continue that conversation anyway, right? And you're saying my volume is too low, but Naomi's is perfect. Well, this is great, isn't it? Right. Naomi, can you slightly turn your volume down, please, so that we can kind of balance us both out? I do apologise for this.
Is that any better?
Is that better, everybody? Yes. Yes, I think that's it. It has to be. It has to be. It has to be. No, everybody, it has to be. We're doing the best we can around here. Stick with us. Right, let's talk to Naomi. Naomi, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is about this madness that's going on in our prison population in England and Wales. We're told it's reached a record high just days before the government's temporary early release scheme comes into force. And so according to figures released by the Ministry of Justice on Friday, the number of inmates has risen by 1,159 since 2nd of August. Well, we know why that is, don't we, Naomi? Because obviously Sir Keir Starmer has come in with his prosecutor hat on, and suddenly everything is worth a prosecution. But you wrote a brilliant comment on X, and I thought that it was worth talking about, frankly, because there is this suggestion that we're so overcrowded in our prisons that we're going to start sending prisoners off to Estonia, right? Tell me what your thoughts are about that.
Oh, I shuddered when I read that, to be honest with you. And I think really as a nation, we need to become less dependent on the idea that locking people up is the solution and is going to cut crime. Family relationships are known to be protective. The Farmer Review found that prisoners who maintain their family relationships during their period in custody were 39% less likely to reoffend. Well, how are you going to manage family relationships overseas? There's the practicalities of sending people overseas. Presumably, they're not going to be sending the people on short sentences because the cost would be so prohibitive relative to the amount of time they'd be there. So it's going to be the people on longer sentences anyway, where arguably the ability to maintain contact with the family is more important. You've then got, sorry.
No, I beg your pardon. Please carry on.
Well, I think you've then got obviously the communication barriers of how are they going to communicate with the staff who are locking them up and looking after them in Estonia? The significant language barriers, obviously, but also I imagine that a lot of communication would then have to be through written communication. Well, 57% of prisoners in the UK have a reading age less than you'd expect of an 11-year-old. And it's already highlighted as a problem in terms of people's ability to manage their sentence whilst they're in the UK. So obviously they'd be even more vulnerable. But I think the thing that really stood out for me is that, the number of people are in prison largely because they've they've experienced significant levels of shame during their lives. They've felt excluded and marginalised from society. They've been abused at home, so felt rejected by their parents. At least 27% have been in care, but when you look at people who've committed more serious offences, you're looking at much higher figures. Where I worked in a high secure prison, for instance, it was over 50% had been looked after as children. They've also been bullied at school, you're talking about figures around 75%. And also, around a quarter have been excluded from school. So these are people who already have a bit of a grudge because they feel society doesn't want them and isn't interested in looking after them. And I think if we send them to Estonia, we're just amplifying that message. And quite often, people in prison, there's a sense of offending because they kind of think, why should I follow society's rules? Society hasn't cared about me. Well, if we're going to amplify that further, it does give the message that these people are our rubbish that we're trying to get rid of.
And that is the thing, isn't it? It's like we're literally throwing away that which we've no more time for, no more understanding. But as you so very clearly understand, these things don't happen in isolation. People don't end up in prison for no damn good reason, right? Aside from a very problematic judicial system. But these people have already, as you say, they already feel isolated from society largely, ostracized. They probably have, a series of psychological and emotional issues to contend with, and sending them at this distance is really problematic. And there are lots of studies, aren't there, which tell us that the importance of people being in prison and of them being close to their loved ones. We already know that, don't we?
Well, we do, and I think it cuts across the advice given to the government. You've got the Farmer Review in terms of, the importance of family relationships, but also the need for people in prison to have adequate access to mental health treatment. And how are you going to provide therapeutic mental health care to people in a foreign country? That it's hard enough for them to access it in the UK when they're in prison. How are they going to get that in Estonia?
Right, exactly. And as you said in your brilliant tweet, far too many have been looked after children, placed in children's homes, moved from foster parent to foster parent, excluded from school. So, as you've already said, this is a history. And we're not. I mean, surely the idea is when we send people to prison, the idea is to rehabilitate them in order to make them more productive when they come out, right? How is that going to do this?
Absolutely. I think really we need to be looking at measures that actually repair relationships with the community. So, projects like restorative justice, obviously not everybody's suitable to that. Not every victim or victim's family want that. But actually, when people do engage with that, they tend to be more satisfied with restorative justice than they are with more punitive measures. Community projects, anything that really helps those who tend to be marginalised, ostracised, and we've cut youth services, for instance. Actually,
Right.
that would be a fantastic place to put this money rather than building more prisons or sending people overseas. It'd be much better to invest in these kind of projects, which have more of a long-term likelihood of paying off.
It's almost as if, because they will know this, right? The justice system and the MPs, they will know exactly what needs to be done. And also now we've brought in the James Timpson. I would have thought, because this is somebody who seems to understand it. He employs people who've been through the justice system in his shops. So I'm quite surprised that now that he's been put in place, they are now suggesting this. Were you surprised?
I did find it a bit of a shock. I was delighted when I heard that James
So
Timpson
was I.
had been appointed. Thought he really gave the right message. But like you're right, Sonia, that all of this information, it's not new information. We've known it for decades, and something about, I think, pandering to the idea of what they think the public want. But actually, if you have an intelligent conversation with people, most people get it, and they understand the histories. They're able to be empathic and think about, well, actually, how is this going to help? So, it'd be good to have a bit more intelligent policy making, really.
Some people in the comments are saying, what about the victims of these crimes? But victims aren't served if we're not actually taking care of what ultimately happens to prisoners, because they're going to come out in a worse shape than they went in, aren't they?
Absolutely. It's like, do you want punitiveness, or do you actually want to cut crime? Because the two things aren't really all that compatible. There are people, obviously, who need to be in prison because of the risk that they pose to the public. I'm not against the notion of prison generally, but actually, like I say, research on restorative justice, where you have reparative conversations, finds that victims tend to report higher satisfaction with those sorts of measures than just purely punitive measures.
Naomi, if by any great stroke of luck for the rest of us, Sir Keir Starmer called you to number 10 today and asked you what you suggest we should be doing regarding the prison situation, what would you say?
I think there needs to be an acknowledgement of what a mess it's in, but actually the solution to that is not to be building more prisons. So I'd want to be seeing investment in community projects. I think so much more could be done in the community, making sure that the people who are in prison, actually they're in prison because they're a risk to the public. And could the risk be better managed with cheaper measures by keeping people out in the community, engaged in more community projects? Like I say, I'm not against prison per se,
Right.
but we can't depend on it. And I know that other countries like Norway used to imprison people at a much higher rate, and now we look up to Norway as being one of the most progressive criminal justice systems in the world.
Right. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Naomi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm sorry we weren't able to get your image on screen. Once I get the hang of this production console, I'll bring you back on so everybody can see how gloriously wonderful you are. Everybody, this is Dr. Naomi Murphy, and she talks good sense. Thank you for joining us this morning, Naomi. Have a great week. Take good care of yourself.
Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Yes, lovely people. I am still adjusting to this console, trying to make sense of it. I do apologise if there was such a difference in volumes, and I hope that doesn't happen with my next guest. I'm not quite sure what it is. We were working on it until late last night to get a hang of that of the audio. So I hope you were able to get most of what she was saying out of that. It shouldn't be the indigenous population that go there, says Brett. In the 1970s, for a short time, says Monopods, I worked for a Catholic orphanage. There were 16 boys in place, and every single one of them had been abused by nuns and priests. They all ended up in prison. So it's exactly, absolutely outrageous. It's an outrageous situation. Yes, absolutely soul sound. I am keeping calm and carrying on, because what else can I do? What else can I do? Right, let's have a look at these inquiries that are coming up this week. Let's see. So we've got, as I say, it's inquiry week. And so what we have is the first inquiry is the Lampard. It's for the mental health patients who died in Essex. The second starts tomorrow. The Thirlwell inquiry kicks off proper. This is about Nurse Lucy Letby, and it almost certainly is an inquiry that is already out of date before it even starts. That's how ridiculous it is. So the Lampard inquiry is a public inquiry into the deaths of mental health patients in Essex. And it's a fairly horrendous situation all round. And if I can just, I want to bring up, this is on screen. This is an image of Melanie Leahy and her son Matthew. I've interviewed a number of mothers who are involved in the Lampard inquiry, including Melanie Leahy, who has been an absolute force behind this. Melanie's son Matthew died at the age of 20 at a mental health clinic in Essex. Melanie has said she believes his death was one of many in a, quote, cull of our most vulnerable, our most gentle, our most needy. Matthew died while he was an inpatient at the Linden Centre in 2012, a treatment centre which is part of the North Essex Partnership University NHS Foundation Trust. His death, along with almost 2,000 other patients, is set to be examined in the Lampard inquiry, which will gather evidence about psychiatric treatments in Essex NHS Trust between 2000 and 2023. Matthew was found unresponsive at a unit now operated by Essex Partnership University Trust. He'd been taken to the Linden Centre in Chelmsford after being detained under the Mental Health Act. He had been under the care of the early intervention. And as I say, I've interviewed Melanie several times. The story she tells is absolutely harrowing. Days before his death, Matthew reported that he had been raped while he was in the unit, but following a visit, the police took no further action. Staff absolutely failed him. They did not follow the Trust's own policy following the allegations. His mother says she wants the inquiry to use its enhanced powers to obtain documents that she has still not seen. Right? Still not seen. At least 2,000 they're looking at who's died in answer to Flicking's questions. And it's a horrendous affair. An ombudsman report in 2020 stated that there was a failure to properly allocate a key worker to Matthew. It also did not plan his care effectively. They or engage consistently with him. And in fact, there were even lies made up on these sheets, right? A jury inquest in 2015 concluded Matthew was subject to a series of multiple failings and missed opportunities over a prolonged period of time by those entrusted with his care. And following a consultation, the new terms of reference for the Lampard inquiry were published earlier this year. And it now begins its phase 2, external, with public hearings as it gathers evidence. But to add to Melanie's distress, a WhatsApp message from former MP Nadine Dorries to former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has literally added to her pain. On Saturday, she tweeted WhatsApp messages about me from Nadine Dorries to Matt Hancock. My son died and you helped in the cover-up. I'm heartbroken. And I was like, wait, tell me that's not true, Melanie. What's going on? Because Melanie was making these claims that they were talking about her in a WhatsApp group. And in fact, they were. Nadine Dorries actually said, I'm picking off the other families and speaking to them one by one to get them on side to isolate her. Talking about Melanie, to isolate her. A grieving mother. That is what these MPs think about people behind closed doors or in WhatsApp groups. That's what they think. It's repugnant, frankly. So the Lampard inquiry, they absolutely do need justice. No doubt about it. They really do. And I pray that they get it. And the Thirlwell inquiry has been set up to examine events at the Countess of Chester Hospital and the implications following the trial and subsequent convictions of former neonatal nurse Lucy Letby. And she was convicted of murder and the attempted murder of 7 babies on both charges at the hospital. Starting tomorrow, week 1 oral evidence will begin. And it will hear opening statements from counsel to the inquiry and from legal representatives on behalf of the core participants. Part A is about the experience at the hospital and elsewhere of the parents of the babies named on the indictment. Part B considers the conduct of people working at the hospital and how Letby was able repeatedly to kill and maim babies on the neonatal unit. Part C will look at the wider NHS culture, examining relationships between the various groups of professionals. Just wipe my mouth. The culture within our hospital and how these affect the safety of newborns in neonatal units. And the inquiry is hearing Part A evidence in private sessions, week commencing 16th September next week. But here's the thing. The problem about the inquiry is, as I say, it is already potentially out of date because there is a significant debate which is taking place about whether Lucy Letby was guilty at all. That is the reality. And then on top of that, we have Chump of the Week, next to Nadine Dorries, of course, that is. And the Chump of the Week, what just happened there? And the Chump of the Week is Wes Streeting, Health Secretary Wes Streeting. He says that people should not really publicly discuss their concerns over a high-profile criminal case. He says Lucy Letby's legal teams or any others writing letters, he's asked them to do it quietly. And Professor Richard Gill, who has been on here, says we've been doing it quietly for more than a year. Sarita Adams and I warned the authorities in March or April 2023. We were told to shut up or else. Now we are obliged to shout it from the rooftops. More power to your elbow, Richard. I absolutely agree with you. And this comment from Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting has form for these sort of things, but this comment came during a conversation with Lewis Goodall on LBC, and Mr. Streeting said it is crass and insensitive to be waging a public campaign in this way because we can debate it, you and I. listeners can debate it. We can read the newspapers, wants to keep it all strictly in a very controlled fashion. So Wes Streeting can debate it, and the newspapers can debate it, and listeners to these legacy media shows can debate it, but don't want the public to debate it as such, right? And he said, we're not the Criminal Case Review Board. No, and that is a failure anyway. We have an independent judiciary in this country. I think we have a fair and successful independent judiciary in this country, he said. Yeah, well, I don't know if everybody agrees with that, and certainly not where it comes to the convictions of Lucy Letby, which is highly problematic. It really is. And there are very serious concerns about it. And just to say, when I say Wes Streeting has formed for being an obnoxious piece of work, around about 2018, he was part of a secret Facebook group that was actually doxing women who were daring to ask questions about gender. And I was one of those women. And I was involved in an article for the Mail on Sunday in which he was cited as being one of the members of this group that was doxing women for asking questions. So Wes Streeting appears to be one of those people who doesn't always like the public asking questions for some reason, because we should trust everything to our political representatives, shouldn't we? Now, I'm going to bring in my next guest, and let us hope we can hear him better than we could hear Naomi. I do apologise, of course, about these issues. It is honestly just the beginning. It is just teething pains, and things will improve. Trust me, they will. Let's bring him in and see what we can do here. And there he is. Hello, Iain.
Hello, Sonia.
How are you? Well, I'm good. Now, let me see if I've got you. For some reason, my guest images are not showing up today, which is a pain. So I'm having to talk to you as if it's a radio. I do apologise for that, Iain.
That's all right.
We've got a new system, a new production system. We were up till late last night testing it, and then this morning it started to play up again. You know how these things work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
London Lady, you seem to be the only one who keeps talking about it being super loud. Iain, could you just see if you could adjust your volume slightly, please? Or Crazy Bunny is now saying it. Oh, yeah, they're saying you're even louder. I'm not sure what's happened. Let's...
Okay, hang on, let me have a look.
Turn up your volume. No, the problem is, it's not that simple, lovely people. Yes, Greg. There are still less glitches than when GB News started and they had a multi-million-pound budget and hundreds of staff. So all good, Sonia. Thank you. I appreciate that. And
is that better?
Is that better, everybody? Okay, here, says Mary. I ain't the only one. Just the first one, says London Lady. It's Sonia that is low, I think. It's Sonia that's low. Yeah, I know. It's not allowing me to turn up for some reason. Hello? Sounds okay for me. Right, we're gonna proceed with this conversation. Sonia is quiet and guests are okay, apparently. Okay, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I wonder why that is. Right, we're going to have to go with it, darlings. We're going to have to go with it. Yes, we are. Okay, now they're saying, which is great. Right, we still have to go with it because I don't have anybody else here who can assist me, unfortunately. Everybody, this is Iain Davies. He's an author and researcher and a bloody good one at that, actually. And I interviewed Iain the other week. We've yet to put out the long form video. And I interviewed Iain about the court case of Richard D. Hall, about the Manchester terror attack, and about Iain's book about it, and Iain's very serious doubts about what had happened in Manchester. But that's not actually what I've brought Iain here to talk about today, although we will talk about it at the end of our conversation. Grand rising, Iain, says our viewers. Lovely to have you with us, Iain. I apologise we can't get you on screen. Yes, absolutely, Healing the Silence. The show must go on, absolutely. So, Iain, I want to talk to you about two things. One, about climate change, and I wish I could see your face at this moment in time because I'm pretty sure you'd be bringing your nose up like this. And we're being told that we've had the 5 hottest days in the last 100,000 years. They've all happened recently. What do you think when you see headlines like that?
I think it's complete gibberish. I think the science of climate change is preposterous. I mean, it's based on just junk science. The theory itself, climate change. There's the way that they negate the impact of solar energy. Basically, it resolves to. I mean, they divide the incoming solar flux by 4 initially, at the very basis of climate science is fundamentally flawed. It amounts to flat Earth theory because they assume that solar flux lands on a flat plane that you know, if you put by averaging it out, if you put a cross section through the Earth and said that solar flux covers that flat plane, that's what basically climate science resolves to. I mean, but leaving that aside, which is a rather contentious point, a guy called Joseph Posma has made a good argument about that. Leaving that aside, I mean, it's just what I think James Corbett called unfalsifiable woo-woo science. I mean, you know, it's either too hot or it's too cold, or there's too much rain, or there's, you know, not enough snow, or there's too much snow. The polar ice caps are melting, except when they're not melting. Hurricanes are increasing, except when they're not increasing. You know, we used to talk about global warming, but since global warming's flatlined, we don't talk about that anymore. Now it's climate change.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point that I saw recently, which is a good point, I can't remember, I apologize to the person that came up with this point. I can't remember the source. Climate change is an output of a systemic change, which can only be measured by, you know, temperature variables and climatic effects over a period of, you know, a long period of time. So then the net result of that is climate change. Climate change itself is not a thing. Climate change is not an input that makes a difference to our environment. Climate change is what we would call the output of systematic measurements of real observable things that would lead us to conclude that you know, that how the climate is changing, bearing in mind that climate change is a constant. You know, climate is always changing. It's always has changed and it always will change. So the idea that they call this thing climate change a threat to us is like saying air is dangerous, or you know, well, in fact, that's part of, I mean, that is one of the arguments they make. You know, I mean, it's just totally ridiculous. And the point, I think, you know, I think that the important thing to look at is what this ludicrous, unfalsifiable woo-woo science is being used for. I think that's far more important.
And I just want to say before we get on to that, because I think that the bigger picture is the most important thing, and that is, how can they make statements like that though, like the most in 100,000 years? How could they possibly know?
Well, they can't. For a start, I mean, they use proxies, you know, things like tree rings and ice cores and things like that, to make kind of generalized kind of estimates of historical temperature records, but they don't accurately know what the hottest day of it was 100,000 years ago or whatever. I mean, you know, it's just, the whole thing is just absurd. I mean, you know, plant life on this planet has never thrived more than it did when we had CO2 levels around 1,500 parts per million. I mean, that was when the Earth was the most verdant it's ever been. It's never been more. You know, we had maximum biodiversity precisely because CO2 levels were so. I mean, we're in a CO2 drought at the moment.
Right.
I mean, the idea that CO2 is a pollutant is just monumentally stupid.
Yes.
I mean, I can't, you know, I mean, the whole thing is just junk. It's junk from start to finish. And I'm personally, I mean, when that claim came out recently that a group of European scientists have found out that, and it's in our face ridiculous, isn't it now? Saying that this summer,
yes,
is the hottest it's ever been in the Northern
Yes,
Hemisphere.
gaslighting, pure
It's
gaslighting. It's got to
just,
be one of the worst. It's been an absolute washout largely, hasn't it? I think we've only had a couple of, well, not even, we haven't consistently even had a couple of weeks of sunshine in the UK.
yeah, I mean, the way they do this is by massaging the statistics and working out averages. So the claim is that the average temperature is the warmest it's ever been. But then you say, well, how do you measure the average? I mean, bearing in mind that they can't work out that there is no single cohesive calculation for the average surface temperature of the Earth, the STA.
Right.
You know, there's no single cohesive way of calculating that. So even that is debatable. They don't even know what the average temperature of the Earth is.
Right.
Calculating that is debatable.
Right.
So when they do these things like work out these averages, I mean, I looked at I don't know whether you remember it, but last year I think the Met Office came out and said that 2023 was the hottest summer in
Yes.
125,000 years or something.
Yeah.
Now, no, sorry, the hottest summer since 1884, I think,
Right.
which was when sort of reasonable records began. I mean, when I looked at how they calculated that, up to 62% of that alleged observable temperature was a modelled input. It was a modelled input, and that model was based on a paper which this is not me saying this. This was the Met Office saying this, which fits in with their climate change prediction. So 62% of their quote unquote average observable temperature wasn't observable. It was the product of a model. So then that all depends on what the parameters are that your model is based on, doesn't it? And the inputs that you put into your model, like moving temperature stations, or simply what they did in 2012, which is remove rural temperature stations from their model set, and only look at urban heat islands. Lo and behold, you know, as far as their models are concerned, the temperature's gone up. Well, it would, wouldn't it, if you cut out all the lower?
Right.
I mean, it
Right.
is just constantly. I mean, I think another thing to bear in mind is that there are billions and billions and billions of pounds and dollars and yen and invested in this scam.
Well, that's the thing.
I mean,
Lots of people are making lots of money off of it, though, aren't they? This is a whole industry, worldwide industry.
I mean, it more than that. Everything is dependent upon it. Their entire model for a new global economy is dependent upon it. So when they're talking about, you know, regulating markets, when people talk about things like you know, like say someone launches a new product, a new financial product, that will have to have in the future, this is what they envisage, an ESG rating.
Right.
So an ESG rating will be dependent upon what, you know, financial institutions consider to be a quote unquote sustainable investment or not. And they mean using, you know, sustainable development goals basically as a market benchmark. So that they're actually tying in their Mickey Mouse system of you know scientific drivel. They're tying that into a market control mechanism,
Right.
by which they will of course control markets, investment, and thereby all industry and product.
And is that the
production and
wider
everything
agenda,
else.
or is there more to it?
Well, I think if you look at sustainable development goals, there are 17 sustainable development goals, and only one of them has got anything to say about climate change. All of the 16 others are all about interfering in pretty much every single aspect of our lives, including our reproductive, you know, capability, and you know, so the most, you know, human fertility and human production and human, you know, are the most intimate part of our life. They want to get involved with that as well and control it. Sustainable development goals is a system of technocratic global control. There's, I mean, that's obvious. It's obvious. So that is all predicated upon us accepting, and the reason that they're pushing this climate junk, the reason that they're pushing it so desperately is because whilst it is, excuse me, it is predicated upon us accepting this mythology that the climate presents some sort of threat to us.
Right. It's
You
our
know,
enemy. It's our enemy.
it's our
I mean,
enemy.
you've got to be careful with Mother Nature, because once Mother Nature decides to do its business, it will do its business. But it's not the enemy that they're talking about. But it does play. Did you see the report which says that Sadiq Khan, much vaunted, ULEZ system, is not actually reducing the level of pollution that he had claimed it would be? Because that's a typical example of us being sold a dud, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the pollutants that were caused by normally aspirated engine, diesel and petrol engines. The most dangerous pollutant really in that was lead. Lead. What I mean, it was fair to say that lead was, a pollutant that we should have been concerned about. But we've removed lead from those fuels, or greatly reduced the lead content in those fuels decades ago. So saying the very suggestion that it's that the CO2 that is emitted from vehicles is a pollutant is nonsense. CO2 is not a pollutant. So from that point, but if the ULEZ thing itself, yeah, I mean I think because I also looked into this. Khan had a unit that he was a scientific unit that he was funding, or that was being funded directly by his office, that was again coming up with extravagant and scientifically illiterate and baseless claims about the impact that ULEZ would have in terms of emissions. And anybody that kind of scrutinized those claims immediately realized that the amount that he was claiming would be the reduction in quote unquote pollution, bearing in mind that it isn't pollution to start with, it was ridiculously exaggerated. I mean, once you started picking the numbers apart, it was quite evident that it would make practically no difference whatsoever. I mean, think about it. It's not the people that are, people that are driving cars into central London. I mean, that's, an important journey for a lot of small businesses, and a lot of, that are people that are being forced out of business because they can't afford to conduct their business because of this ridiculous tax that's been imposed upon them, which all leads itself to 15-minute cities, doesn't it? Which coincidentally, Khan was chairman. I don't think he is anymore, of the C40 cities movement, which is one of the primary lobby groups behind that ridiculous concept of the 15-minute city. Indeed. Which is basically about creating urban prisons. Yeah. So this is it. I get exasperated to the point. Well, I laugh.
People feel and relate to your frustration, Iain, because some of the comments. Let me read you some of the comments going on here. I mean, they're great. It's absolutely brilliant. People completely understand. People completely get it. And one of the issues, of course, is this whole idea that if you pay your ULEZ money, you can then drive. But the whole point is that not only is that creating a several-tier society where people who can afford to pay and drive will do so, and those who can't won't be able to, but that tells us that the whole thing is a nonsense, because as long as you've got the money, you can still carry on driving anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same. I mean, if you look at things like, if we go back to the very kind of underlying kind of rationale, well, I use the term loosely, but suggested rationale for all of this, something like Agenda 21. So they're talking about creating what they called human settlements, and then having what they call protected areas. So what do they mean by that? What they mean is that we'll all be forced to live in 15-minute cities, which is as Agenda 2030 rolls out, human settlements become what they call 15-minute cities. But we know what they really mean. What they really mean is human settlements. And the protected areas will only be able to be accessed by people with independent transport, because, of course, if you force everybody onto public transport, then your freedom of movement is curtailed and removed
Right.
because that's controlled by a third party. So you no longer have independent freedom of movement. Your freedom of movement is
Terrible.
restricted by being forced onto public transport, which can be controlled. Things that the Rockefellers were doing
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the early 20th century. This is the trajectory, the policy trajectory and the policy agenda could not be clearer. It could not be clearer. It is
Right.
about controlling us. It's about controlling humanity because we are perceived as a problem. And we're either perceived as a problem to be controlled and reduced or as a resource to be used. That's all we are for the
Terrible.
people that are
Terrible.
behind these agendas. That's all we are.
And that's why we have to keep raising awareness. That's why we have to fight back. And all of this, of course, you talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, obviously the UN 2030, we call it. There's that year again around here because obviously we see so many news stories which is all geared towards 2030. But also part of that, of course, is digital ID. And what they're now saying, of course, is that digital ID will be required from November 2024 for anyone travelling to EU countries with new entry-exit system. I mean, we already... like people like you and I, we already knew this was on the cards, right? But is there anything, do you think, at this stage that we can do to stop this?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount we could do to stop this. But, okay. I think, personally, I think that things like protest and, lobbying your political party and all that kind of stuff and speaking up is very important. It's all part of putting pressure on the system. But if we personally, my personal view is that the solution is found within each of us because we're facing evil, right? So the battle of good against evil is an internal one. So we need to take every measure that we can. We need to consciously and deliberately take control of our own lives. So that means being as independent as we can possibly be from the state. And by the state, I don't just mean government. I mean a public-private partnership between the state and I would say that there's two states that are melded together, the political state and the corporate state. So we need to be as independent as we can possibly be from that. We need to take deliberate actions every day. So, for example, they want us to use digital ID to travel to Europe. Now, bearing in mind that the government said when it made this announcement, now we had a referendum in 2016, right, where people elected to leave the EU. The government said that it's been working closely with the European Union to ensure that, that the system is streamlined. So bearing in mind the Conservative Party 2 years ago were talking about this. So we got a new Labour government. It's still going through because it doesn't make any difference who you elect. The policy trajectory was set years ago. So digital ID was coming no matter what. I mean, we've had numerous attempts to foist digital ID upon us in the UK, and we've rejected it every single time. Doesn't matter. They're still going to foist it upon us and impose it on us. So we need to. The system is irredeemably broken. It doesn't serve us. It serves an oligarch class. That's who it serves, and we are deluded if we think it serves anybody else. So it doesn't serve us. So the way that we break away from this and the way that we fight it is that we must consciously resist it by, for example, refusing to go abroad. What do you think the European economy would happen to the European economy if British tourism was taken out of it?
Yeah,
I mean, we can do that. We can do that.
We can, but the problem is that who would agree to that? Because when you look at how many people, and obviously we have to be careful on a YouTube live stream, but look at how many people actually dissented when it came to C19. It wasn't the vast majority, was it? People were literally prepared to have the jab in order to travel. That's how insane some people are, though, Iain.
Yeah, it's true, but also bear in mind that there were millions of people that marched against it, who, that that was just removed from from public discourse. I mean, the mainstream media, or what I call the legacy media, just refused to report on those massive marches that took place, opposing what they were doing. So there's more of us opposed to this than they want us to believe. So, but if we think the solution is going to come from a new political leader, I personally think that we're in deep trouble, because no solution is going to come from anyone else. The solution has to come from us, within us. So we have to make deliberate, conscious decisions every day to move towards a better position, move towards freedom rather than tyranny. And we do that by refusing to buy something if we can only buy it digitally. You know, refusing to use a shop or a store or a business if it won't accept cash. Refusing to go abroad and travel to France if we have to use digital ID. Refusing to get digital ID. I mean, I know this is gonna make things much more inconvenient for people, and it's gonna, you know, you miss out on your holiday, But how about this? Instead of going on holiday to France, what would happen to small local communities in holiday destinations in the UK if we decided that we were going to reinvigorate their economies by actually spending our money by going on holiday in the UK? Now, I know we got crap weather. It's not very nice,
No.
and we miss out on the sunshine. But these are the kind of things that we have to do. We have to do that. Us, that nobody else is going to. If we're looking towards some political party to come along and solve this for us, forget it. Forget it. The system is entirely and utterly captured. So we can't fix it, but we can build something better. But the only people that are going to build something better is us. We're the only ones that can do it. And we can do it, but we just have to. It's going to be a generational thing. I mean, this isn't something that we're going to be able to fix tomorrow. We're going to have to consciously work towards this for generations to come. But if we do,
Right.
they can't win. They can't defeat us. We are too many. So we really need to get our fingers out and start making conscious decisions. And it's the little things that we do every day, the small decisions that we make every day. Don't buy their media. Don't buy their TV license.
Yes.
Don't subscribe to any of their drivel. Don't do it. Stop doing it and start building better communities, working together, building better communities for us and the people that we love and we care about, and stop being manipulated and pushed around by, what I would describe as a parasite class.
And that is the reality. We do have the power. We must remember that we have the power, and we have the power, as you say, and that is we can literally choose where we spend our money, how we spend our money. Always make sure you've got cash on you if you can. I mean, that's when every Friday I make sure I take cash out of the cash point. And honestly, when we first moved into this area, I think we had 3 cash points in the high street. We now have actually no, we had 5, and now we have 2, right? So we know they're dwindling, so they're doing everything they can. It is a control system, but there are more of us than them, and we have to remember that. People really relate. What you're saying is really resonating with people in the comments this morning, Iain, and that is the point. Is I think people have now reached the point where everybody has just had enough, and it's time to do something. We are the majority, and we can do that, and there are ways that we can have peaceful, legal tax rebellions elections, all these different things, all these things are achievable. Now, Iain, before you leave us this morning, just talking about the system, you have been very much involved in the case of Richard D. Hall, obviously filmmaker Richard D. Hall, who has been in and out of court this year. And it's to do with his film about the Manchester Arena explosion. We were told it was a terrorist attack. And you have many, many questions about that, which we explore at length in a long form video. But oftentimes people say to me, well, what's happening with Richard at the moment? Anything that you can tell us at the moment? We're still waiting for the judgment, aren't we?
Yeah, we're still waiting for the verdict. You know, I mean, I'm an observer of Richard's case. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat this morning.
Me too.
I'm an observer of Richard's case. I'm not involved in it at all, you know. But I mean, obviously, I'm a supporter of Richard as well, because I believe that he exposed the evidence which shows that the Manchester Arena was a hoax. So, and you know, that's something that I've pursued. And really, I mean, I think the important thing is to look at that evidence. Really, Richard himself, as far as I know, I mean, obviously, he's waiting for the verdict. I think, you know, something that I wrote about on my Substack, where I've covered the case quite at length on my Substack. You know, I think it was a relief to him. You know, I think we could see that it was a relief to him to this part of the process is over. You know, in so much as, you know, that it's out of his hands at the moment. There's not much he can do about it. He's just got to wait for the verdict. We don't know what the verdict would be. You know, there were signs in the case that at least, you know, the court was listening to what he had to say. So, you know, I mean, there's every reason to hope that the verdict might be beneficial you know, or might be favourable. We don't know.
Right.
I mean, I have my fears. You know, I have my fears about what the verdict will be, but I mean, you know, I don't know either.
Right, got you. And it's imminent. And of course, he's been sued for GDPR, which is personal data, and harassment. They didn't sue him for defamation because the time limit had expired. So it is going to be interesting, isn't it? That's imminent, isn't it? That judgment, that can literally be any time.
Yeah, I believe October. It'd probably be, you know, any time after early October. Should be put out. Yeah.
Got you. Iain, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Sorry we had to turn it into a radio as opposed to a TV, but we greatly appreciate you being here with us. Everybody, this is Iain Davies. I will put a link to his Substack and his work in the description below at the end of the stream. Iain, take good care of yourself. Thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, pleasure. Take good care of yourself. And everybody, look out for that upcoming long form video. And it's brilliant chatting with Iain. Take care, Iain. Speak soon.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Brilliant. And I do apologise once again for not being able to get an image on the screen. Did the sound improve, by the way? Because I was playing around with the desk while I was talking to Iain. Did it improve at all, people? Cheers, Iain, says Drumstick and Mayday and Shalini and Jacqueline and Catherine and Synchronised Soul and the Blue Nomad and Jan and on and on and on. He's a smart cookie, isn't he, Iain? It's quite nice just to see Sonia, says Soul Sand. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's not ideal, but at least we've got something. This camera is moving around following me now, isn't it? Right. Audio is fine, says Jacqueline. Thank you so much. Glad to hear that. Right. Let's have a look at some of the stories that I'm not able to cover so far. One story which really gets me going rather a lot, if I can actually find what I want on this, is to do with Boris Johnson, right? And this young lady called Charlotte Owen. Now, there is something really odd about this story. Let me just bring it up so I can see what I'm talking about here. Actually, before I get to that, I want to just talk about the globalist media busy getting on side with more internet censorship. Did anybody see this last week where LBC's James O'Brien, obnoxious pygmy of a man, practically helping interviewee Tony Blair through the censorship door? In an interview, I call Tony Blair mass assassin, right? But an interview with mass assassin Tony B. Liar, the radio presenter said, and I'm going to quote him directly, so you can see exactly the role that mainstream media journalists and presenters are playing. in silencing us. And he said to Tony Blair, the question of jurisdiction as well. You know, the server will be in one country, the person writing the message will be in another country, arguably seeing this a little bit with the riots recently. But do you foresee a point in the not too distant future where other countries are going to have to follow Brazil's lead and take actual action against platform owners for the dissemination of disinformation? To which Tony Blair responded, I certainly see a position where the world's going to have to come together and agree simple rules around social media platforms. And I think that's, you know, quite what the answer is. And system of regulation, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there should be. And there's got to be, because it's not just how people can provoke hostility and hatred. But I don't know what the answer to this is, but I'm just saying, to which James O'Brien then helpfully jumped in saying, we can't carry on as we are. And then Tony Blair responded, we can't carry on as we are. And I think the impact on young people, particularly when they've got access to mobile phones very young, and they are reading a whole lot of stuff and receiving a whole lot of stuff that I think is really messing with their minds in a big way. As I say, I'm not sure what the answer to it is, but I'm sure we need to find one. I'm sure they do. And the reason that you have no, that's not that easy, not slash. I only wish it was. It isn't. We've got a whole new production panel here that I am working on my own, and I literally could not bring up any image at all for the guests. So it wasn't me not wanting to show you who the guest was. It's literally a technical issue that I will find my way around eventually, don't worry. So anyway, so going back to that, and that is, you can see how these mainstream media journalists are very keen to push for censorship on social media, and they do that because when you're on social media, when you're a content creator, we are taking eyes and ears away from mainstream. Right? And they don't like that because they are losing their massive sphere of influence that they have held the ground on for decades. And so you do have people like James O'Brien who want censorship, right? That's what they want. And then there's Channel 4's Cathy Newman. Anybody remember when she had her butt handed to her by Jordan Peterson? Now, I don't claim to be a Jordan Peterson fan, but that was one of the most brilliant interviews that certainly launched him on the world stage, where she was trying to play gotcha with him on a constant basis, and he absolutely finished her off. So Channel 4's Cathy Newman was in conversation with Baroness Charlotte Owen, talking about online disinformation and what she intends to do about it. And I'm thinking, this is a young woman, and suddenly she's having a say in what we should do with online disinformation. Well, she would, because not everybody, but a lot of people are under the impression that she may have some sort of relationship with Boris Johnson. And one of them is she his daughter? Many people have asked that. Anyway, so while we're talking about Charlotte Owen, let's look at her. Who is she, right? Yeah, Stephen Hall despises MSM with a passion. I hear you. Yes, anyway, he did rip her a new one. Absolutely. Robin says James O'Brien is so irrelevant. Yeah, but as one of the commenters said, remember when lots of people used to think he was all right, but he is such an establishment hack these days. So Charlotte Owen, right? Who is this Charlotte Owen? That's the question. Who is she? So the image on the screen, as you can see, is of Boris Johnson and Charlotte Owen. Let me just bring that back so we can see that. And have you all got that? What's it doing for me? Right. Yes, I think you've all got that. And honestly, they do look alike. I actually do think they do look alike, right? So let's talk about Charlotte Owen. It was baffling enough, really, wasn't it, when Boris Johnson, out of nowhere, suddenly elevated Charlotte to the House of Lords. She's young. She has a list of very short-term jobs in her past. She's inexperienced. There's really not a great deal about her that makes any sense why she's suddenly being elevated, right, to this great status. And let me just see what's going on here. Yeah, let me take that off because you've taken off half my head. Anyway, so Baroness Owen, she's now going to introduce a law change aimed at criminalising deep fake creation. Well, that's interesting. So that, again, is about internet censorship. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, absolutely. There are problems with deep fakes, especially when it comes to kind of issues of sex, how they use them, how they use people's heads, and they kind of transplant them on nude bodies and everything. All that stuff is ugly and horrible. But who the hell is Charlotte Owen? And why has she suddenly got so much power? And also what is interesting, right? So she is literally the most inexperienced and youngest person to be made a peer. And Boris Johnson did it. They faced many questions over his exact relationship with Charlotte. They've denied it. Even though Boris Johnson's first wife actually had the surname of Owen, which I think is interesting, but they've denied that is Charlotte's mum. Charlotte's mum has actually said, no, Boris Johnson is absolutely not the father. But this law that Baroness Owen, it's just ridiculous, right? It's just ridiculous. So it's aimed at criminalising disproportionately sexist deepfake porn. It will be introduced in Parliament. And so Charlotte Owen was a former advisor to Boris Johnson. She's now formally known as Baroness Owen of Alderley Edge. She was a special advisor to the ex-Prime Minister. A special advisor. Like, I'm not being funny, but what on earth does she know? What does she know to be a special advisor? So definitely, she's absolutely in with Boris Johnson for another reason other than her experience and other than her abilities. Now, we all know that Boris Johnson is a compulsive liar. He will lie about practically anything. We know that about him. We do. Okay, so we cannot trust him to tell us the relationship between him and Charlotte Owen. But also, the thing is, right, the Online Safety Act actually made it illegal to share deep fakes without consent. But Lady Owen, Baroness Owen, has said the law needs to go further. Of course it does, because again, it's about more criminalisation on the internet. And look at what they do. They do this on a constant basis. They say this is for the good of the children, right? This is for protecting children. But it never, ever is. And what she said recently was Boris Johnson always offers wonderful advice. Well, what is really curious now, of course, is it turns out that Boris Johnson has also brought her in for his new company, Better Earth Limited. And she was just in Parliament a junior aide with a few years work experience, and suddenly she's a leading employer at his company Better Earth Limited. Better Earth Limited, you already know what that's going to be about, people, right? It is about them obviously hijacking nature. That's interesting. Laid Back Media spells it Charlotte Owen, Owing. Curious, very curious. Crazy Bunny said, come on, people, get liking. And so what's interesting is Boris Johnson had failed to recently disclose that he'd met a uranium lobbyist while Prime Minister before entering into a new business with said controversial Iranian-Canadian uranium entrepreneur. And that new company, Better Earth Limited, as I say, employs Charlotte Owen. The Canadian at the heart of this is Amir Adnani. And you have to wonder, what are all these three people gathering together to do? A deeply inexperienced young woman, the same age as my daughter, suddenly given a huge position. Who is she? I mean, they don't seem capable of telling us exactly who she is and where she has come from. And a little bit about Better Earth. Who are they? They're headquartered in a serviced office building in Sevenoaks in Kent. Describes itself as a, wait for it, energy transition company. Website is currently under construction. It says it will work directly with national governments and regions that are seeking both inward investment and or to reduce their emissions ahead of, there's that year again, 2030. This is ridiculous, right? So him employing her now, as well as making her appear in the House of Lords, raises further questions, right, over their relationship. And we have a right to know. I think they look alike. I actually do. And it was interesting because Charlotte Owen only briefly mentioned climate in her maiden speech earlier this year in the Lords. But she did actually showcase her interest in technology. So that's two of the things, literally, that Iain has just been talking about, right? And that is the whole issue of climate change and who actually stands to benefit from it, and digital ID. And Charlotte Owen would appear to be perfectly placed. So let's see. And also, it's interesting, at this company, Owen joins two other former Conservative ministers at the firm. Chris Skidmore, he resigned the whip over Rishi Sunak's oil and gas plan. And Nigel Adams, a Johnson ally and former minister without portfolio. And we shall see what it's all about. Is Johnson behind digging up Cornwall for lithium? Don't know. Can't believe Roy Hodgson is here. I have no idea what you're talking about. All the world's a backstage, says Eric. It would appear to be, wouldn't it? But the bottom line is everybody knows something is wrong. And that is the thing, is they keep gaslighting us on a constant basis. They present us with this young woman who has come from nowhere, has very little experience at anything, much less life, but she's a special advisor to the Prime Minister. She looks astonishingly like the Johnsons. Yes, Colin. Charlotte Owen looks a bit like BJ's mother, whose name was also Charlotte, if I remember correctly. Right? No, Humphrey says none of them will have an original thought nor be allowed to voice it. Well, that's also part of it, part and parcel of it, isn't it? Is they want compliant people around who can do the job. That's what they do. That's what they do. Right, let us move on. Nepotism is rife in politics. Interbreeding is likely, says Tim Ford. I hate all nepotism. I do. And I hate nepotism because what it does is it creates a very shallow pool of talent, especially in the entertainment industry, when you see this actor's son or daughter suddenly get a leg up and kind of bringing through similar things. There are very few children who have benefited from nepotism who are real talents in their own right. Very few. MFR58, why is no one talking about Cornwall being turned into a lithium mine? Well, let me bring on somebody who can. I can't talk about it because I don't claim to know about it. But if you can suggest somebody who you believe knows a great deal about this, then please suggest it to me. Email me, tell us in the comments, we'll pick it up. That would be good. It's not that we're not afraid to look at it. We're not afraid to look at these things. It's just we want the right person, because I don't want to be, talking about something I don't understand. But one thing I do understand a little bit is alt media. And Russell Brand is probably one of the very biggest names, right, in alternative media. And he's one of those incredibly fortunate people, I have to say, that after he was accused of a series of sex crimes, he found Jesus. Praise the Lord. Here he is on his knees. Tucker Carlson asked him to help kick off his live tour on Wednesday night in the state of Arizona. Tucker introduced Russell to his fans, said Russell was one of the people he most admires. At the end of the show, bowed his head as Mr. Brand knelt and gave a communal prayer without notes. Russell Brand said, I pray in your name that the forthcoming election be an opportunity for unity for America and Americans. Because obviously Russell Brand is now making his fortune in America, right? Because he's turned all MAGA. And bear in mind, this is a person who, when Ed Miliband was trying to get in as Prime Minister, Russell Brand went all out on Labour lefty side, including interviewing Ed Miliband, I think a day before the election, having a being the guest editor, I think it was on the New Statesman. But so very, very left wing, and now very, very right wing. Okay, so that's what's going on. And so there's Russell there, and he prays all right, says beyond belief. I find it very creepy, actually. In a recent video, he said that the more he prays, the more coincidences there are in his life. God is working me into the shape that he needs me to be, he said. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Brand's spiritual rebirth has been preceded by many accusations about him. He's currently understood to remain the subject of a parallel inquiry by the Metropolitan Police over various allegations of sexual offences. He's been accused by 4 women of rape, sexual assault, emotional abuse, alleged to have been committed during a 7-year period from 2006 to 2013, when he was at the height of his fame. Brand has strenuously denied all the allegations, insisting his relationships were always consensual. And Brand said he got baptised as he saw it as an opportunity to leave the past behind and leave behind the sins. So there you go. He's leaving behind the sins. And I just find that creepy. It was so performative, right? My life has changed, he said. Praise Jesus indeed. And can somebody explain to me why the alternative media all these days have the same talking points? They do. The good monkey on X pointed out to me that the current talking point, of course, is about nanobots and technology. We saw that all over the weekend. And we saw that with Dr. John Nurse Campbell, who put up a video. It went viral. I'm sure he made an absolute fortune off of it. And then yesterday he took it down. And it was based on a study. And let me just read you what some people have to say about this. WikiLeaks said, sorry, but this is not a believable study. No ethics approval despite clinical samples. Vials were incubated for a year without bacterial or fungal growth, and goes into a long list of reasons about why this study that Dr. John Campbell was working from for his viral video cannot be safe. And actually finishes by saying, I'm happy to consider if you can find a valid publication record for young Miley at that address, who is the author of said studies. Who's Debbie? Tucker is a legend in my eyes, says Martin. Good for you, Martin. And what John Campbell said on removing his video, several friends were uncomfortable with this paper on nanostructures. I have therefore deleted my video report on this paper until its scientific validity or otherwise is clarified. It is good that we have such a global community of expertise to advise in near real time. Yeah, but not such near real time, John. Before you put it up, posted it, it was shared all over, copied by all of these so-called alternative media voices as a talking point, and they're all at it. They're all at it, you know, whether that is Mark Atwood actually responded saying, my response to Dr. John Campbell's video yesterday about the Japanese research paper, Mark was actually saying this is absolutely ridiculous. This is what everybody was talking about 4 years ago. And suddenly Dr. John Campbell is making a thing of it. And then the next thing we know, in 24 hours, Dr. John Campbell is saying, no, that none of that's true. Right. But he's getting kicked under the bus by a number of people, including Steve Kirsch, who said self-assembling nanostructures, question mark, exclamation mark, colour me skeptical. That would be technology well beyond anything known in medicine. And Campbell is at it, still is. Brand played the child kidnapper at the opening of the 2012 Olympics. Brand certainly did, people. And Monkey, as I say, going back to my good friend Monkey pointed out, tweet, oh dear, anyone would think he posted it and waited for the views and shares, made his money, started the ball rolling for others to pick it up and then deletes it. People will think it's all nonsense, won't they? And this is what Monkey said about John Campbell. Jessica Rose, I think is an immunologist, said the layers of what the F are almost too much to process here. That paper is riddled with oopses. And besides John backing its authenticity, in quotes, it's shocking that the meat grinder we call media is prompting others to call him out for backing this story now and not 4 years ago. And she goes on. And so the point is this is not a good look. This is not a good look at all. And then you have all these alternative voices who are all jumping up and down saying, we already knew that, we already said that. And then Dr. John says, actually, can't be trusted, and backs away from it. But some people would say Dr. John Campbell is still trusting faulty science one way or another. And many people are really critical these days about what is going on in the so-called alternative media because they all do appear to have the same or very similar talking points. I don't. I absolutely am not part of all of that. But then I am not an affiliate in the expanding narrative network. I want to give a shout out to Amazing Polly. She's reported that many of these characters in so-called alternative media have the same talking points because they are funded in one way or another by the same organisation, the Wellness Company. Right? The Wellness Company. And she also points out that the same group of technocrats push them, including Elon Musk on X, Telegram, Rumble, and there is this kind of online influencer campaign, right? And the Wellness Company, by the way, only started in June 2022. Already it can pay all these superstar influencers and has huge advertising budget, points out Polly. Who is it? Where has it come from? Started by Foster Colson and Dave Lopez. The Wellness Company has quickly become the leading alternative to big pharma-backed company government healthcare. It's led by Dr. Peter McCulloch, who made his name during C19, Dr. Drew Pinsky, same, Dr. Harvey Risch, and Dr. Jim Thorpe. And there is a problem with it because you have to wonder. I mean, there's been a number of articles which talk about how these MAGA influencers are able to do what they're doing because they have the wellness company behind them. And you have to wonder how truly independent are these people, whether that is Laura Loomer, whether it's Naomi Welf, or whether it's Russell Brand, who is also backed by the wellness company. And because the problem is, since we launched this live stream, I've now had 11 approaches of sponsorship. I've turned down every one of them because they didn't add up. And because in order for me to show up here, I have to be able to know that I am not compromised. I've been compromised in the past, and I've been compromised by working for people who censored me in one way or another, right? And I don't want that anymore. I'm already compromised enough by being on a YouTube live stream, which censors heavily, right? So the wellness company, Choose Love. So basically, it's helped to underwrite all these kind of online content creations of all of these people, whole mass of people. They claim to sell supplements. They claim to be an alternative health company. They only started 2 years ago, and yet they seem to have amassed millions of pounds out of nowhere. And one must ask, who are they? Because I know people who run supplement companies and they're not multimillionaires. So I want to know who is behind it, really, because it is interesting how the people that the wellness company seem to be behind are also some of the biggest names in alternative media, right? Such as Russell Brand. You are not going to get a bigger name in alternative media than Russell Brand. But how alternative is he really? He wasn't talking up about C19 4 years ago. No, he wasn't. And Russell Brand is somebody I find deeply unpleasant and opportunistic, and he's making an absolute shed load of money now, obviously, because he now appears to the MAGA crowd. And that's exactly why he rocked up at the start of Tucker Carlson's tour. Don't get me wrong, these people sometimes are able to put out really good stuff, right, in between all of it. But then this is the thing, this is the whole thing, and that is when you have somebody like a John Campbell who absolutely pushed the C19 narrative fully, and then he does an about turn and he says, I was fooled as much as anybody else. And that's all good, because people have to be allowed to make mistakes, and as long as they say I made a mistake, right? So people are allowed to make mistakes, and as long as they fess up to it, and as long as they say I did make a mistake and I'm terribly sorry and I am responsible for this, then generally most people can move on. But when you have a situation like a Dr. John Campbell, and he cannot wait to make his videos because he makes an absolute fortune. He makes an absolute fortune. But is there more to him? Is there more to people like Dr. John Campbell? Because after he put out that video and a number of people then commented on it, it literally went viral, right? So a number of people then commented on it. And then the next thing is he pulls it and says it's an unsafe study. And loads of other people said it's an unsafe study. So these are, questionable people who are putting this stuff out. I was fooled. That's Campbell's bait, says Beyond Belief. Yes, he was fooled. And to a degree, I understand how he was, because he was part of that system. As a nurse, he was part of the medical industrial complex, right? He was part of that. And I think largely many of these people were brainwashed. But honestly, I'm just a journalist, and I was asking questions even before C19 started. There are literally tweets online, before C19, when they started to give us all the warning signs that they were going to come after us in a totalitarian way. And I was already asking questions, and I asked questions about the C19 jab from the get-go. I remember even doing a poll about it, saying if they suddenly came up with some kind of miracle, would you take it? And people were in this poll saying, well, they're not going to come up with a miracle jab without, 10 years of testing and all that. Yeah, Mels, he's not a doctor, he's a nurse. Absolutely. So the point is, what influence is the wellness company having on what is being said online? And ideally, I'd love Polly to join me one morning, because she's done the deepest dive on this. And I think what she's done is actually brilliant. She's been targeted for it, of course, because once you start speaking out about people, you get targeted. And especially if there's more going on behind the scenes. And I would suggest that there is more going on behind the scenes. But anyway, praise the good Lord, Russell Brand has found Jesus. And that's all right, right? Russell Brand has found Jesus. So that's all good. Now, Talking about health, and you have to be careful about talking about health on YouTube, I see that Great Ormond Street Hospital. Now, Great Ormond Street Hospital is obviously most famously known as being a hospital for children. It's based in London, and something rather horrendous has happened there. It is now overseeing an urgent review of the cases of more than 700 patients after concerns were raised about one of its former surgeons. The surgeon is Yasser Jabbar, who has not had a license to practice medicine in the UK since January, and he is at the heart of this review by Great Ormond Street Hospital. Great Ormond Street said 22 children in 39 cases looked at so far had come to some degree of harm, and that it is taking the concerns incredibly seriously. So, 22 children in 39 cases have come to a degree of harm. And you know how vulnerable people are in hospital, much less children in hospital. 721 patients were treated by Jabbar. He was a consultant orthopedic surgeon. He worked at the hospital's lower limb reconstruction service from 2017 until he stepped down in September last year. This looks like mass medical negligence. And I'm sure there are people out there, people contact me about medical negligence that they've experienced and they're unable to prove it, and it's awful because I can't do anything about it, because without any form of proof I can't do anything. So I just want to say, if you are dealing with a medical negligence situation, you need a medical negligence solicitor. Elizabeth Maliacal is a medical negligence solicitor who's involved in looking at this, and apparently Great Ormond Street Hospital said they've contacted all 721 patients or their families on more than one occasion, will continue to be in contact with them. And it is really very concerning. And I just want to break that down. Of those 39 cases reviewed so far, how 22 children have been found to have been harmed, with 9 classified as suffering low, moderate harm, and 13 classified as severe harm with potentially lifelong injuries. But that's not all. In addition to that, 456 cases have been looked at by a senior nurse and paediatrician and have not yet been categorised as needing urgent attention. How many people has this surgeon damaged? How many children, rather? These are children. It's so deeply concerning. Deeply concerning. I was to Great Ormond Street Hospital when I was little, as my mother thought I had a problem with my left eye, says Stephen Hoare. Yes, right, all people are biased. Puerile remarks or not. Yes, all people are biased. I don't know if you talk about Russell Brand. I've seen a couple of people say, I like Russell, he's spiritual. Absolutely. None of that. I don't doubt any of that. I'm just saying how convenient that he does this great big massive public display of thank you Jesus, and also don't forget he was baptized in the Thames as well. And so just all of that I find too performative, frankly. It doesn't have to be a big public affair, does it? What kind of surgery are we looking at here? Well, Mel, there's the question. I mean, to my understanding, he's an orthopedic surgeon, right? So we're talking about to do with limbs. And let me give you an example of one of his failings. So there was one example where parents of a young boy feared that something was wrong. When they raised it with Mr. Jabbar, he was very dismissive. They sought separate opinions from other specialists, and it was to do with a frame that was used for lengthening the young boy's legs. I didn't even know you could lengthen legs. That doesn't sound good to me, but apparently you can, right? And the frame was, after a couple of days, the frame became loose. The child was in a lot of pain. You could feel the bone in his leg, which felt out of position, like it wasn't lined up. It was protruding in the wrong way. Can you imagine that for a child, the bone protruding out of their leg? Terrible, terrible. I read the articles and can't believe he removed limbs, says Synchronized Soul. Absolutely egregious. Yes, well, flicking. That's harm. Exactly. At the moment, it's all subject to a lot of kind of generalized terminology because there's a very serious review taking place here, which will almost certainly lead to criminal charges, I should imagine. Yes, Nettles, Great Ormond Street Hospital. said my son was there as an infant. And Sail Away is back on brand. So why has Brand never been shadow banned if he's so outspoken? Ooh, good question. Right, let me move on. So I mentioned this briefly with Iain, but I think it's worth mentioning again because this impacts us all, and that is Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan's hated ULIZ expansion has failed to lower pollution levels in London's biggest borough, right? It's absolutely insane. So basically what happened was we already had low emission zones in central London, which was introduced by Boris Johnson when he was mayor of London. You had to pay, I think it was £12.50 a day in order to be able to drive in central London. And then Sadiq Khan, being the head of C40 Cities, being an eco-fascist, being somebody who saw his eye on the main chance of making even more money out of beleaguered Londoners, decided to expand it to outer London. But what he claimed was he used actually, I think, the study of one child who was said to have died from pollution, which is horrendous, absolutely terrible, but one study. And as I said earlier to Iain, the thing is if you can afford to drive, you can carry on driving. So this is not about lowering pollution levels at all. But a report by Bromley Council has found that after the ULEZ was put into place in the borough, there was no overall lowering in pollution in the months that followed. The borough is partly rural and the largest in London, saw vehicle pollutants rise after the charge was implemented on August 29, 2023, according to a report by the council's Environment Committee. And it said that when the measurements of the NO2 were taken in November last year, the levels were higher at all 32 air quality monitoring stations in Bromley than the previous August. The report blamed seasonal weather, temperature variations for the rise, with data from December 2023 showing that only 8 locations had higher levels of NO2 compared to the same August. And there's been huge criticism about ULEZ, obviously, and then you've had the Blade Runners, and the Blade Runners being a campaign group, an anonymous campaign group, who have been quite literally removing these ULEZ cameras. We've seen some of them interviewed. Obviously, they cover their faces because it's a criminal act. And Khan has regularly been heavily criticised for his decision to expand the scheme in the first place. He sparked protest, obviously sparked campaign groups like the Blade Runners, for example. But the fact is that it isn't. It was a bait and switch, wasn't it? We all know it. And it's the gaslighting I can't stand. Like literally the gaslighting, because as I say, if Khan truly believed that this was about the dangers of CO2 emissions, about NO2, then nobody would be allowed to drive. But the fact is, if you can afford to pay, you can play. That's reality, isn't it? Yes, all about the money, says Soul Sound. When will it become all about the knowledge and talents? What's this? The witch in charge. What? Sharon Shoestring? I remember that name. Wasn't she the head of social services when Baby P was murdered? Wasn't that the woman? Sonia, wish you would cover the Deagle report. What is the Deagle report? Do I know the Deagle report? But I will, if it's of relevance to our viewers, and it certainly seems to be to Angel. They do, Shug. They use the same techniques as the mob, but we just don't see it. And we would have cars that run on water, says Kat. What's Wizard's Words? It's going to be starting my channel with this new confidence very soon, maybe today. Quick, short intro type video and get going, I think. I'd join you live depending on topic. Baby P, that's right. A connection with York and North Yorkshire Council's SS. Yes, I remember Sharon Shoesmith. She was obviously dragged all across the coals in mainstream media for what happened to Baby P. What is it? Yes. Anne likes the Blade Runners. Oh, please, beyond belief, Baby P never got justice. Baby P's mother hasn't she just been recalled back to jail because of some kind of issue with her tag? Anyway, I digress. But the point is that it's a lie. We've been sold a lie about ULEZ, and Bromley Council have proven it, and nothing will change. Do you know what? Even if we had somebody else other than Sadiq Khan, I don't think they'd change it back, because it's making too much money for the office of mayor. She was promoted, right? Do I? I think I must do. I think I must do sail away. Look, you've got to bear in mind, I cover so much. There's only so much that one human being can actually cover, right? And unless somebody brings it to my attention, then I may not cover it, but I will happily cover it. But I know the name of it. What is it about? Right? Sail away. It's no good you doing that because covering your face and everything. Remind me what it's about. If you give me a prompt, I may well go, oh, yes, that's what it is. That's what it is. Okay. So, just want to point out that the lovely Chris Coverdale, who was on with us recently, he's going to be at the Granary in Leith on Friday, 20th of September. I talked there in June. Lovely people there. It's being organised by Trisk Films. And it's 7 to 10 p.m. And on Friday, 20th of September, 2024. No, Blue Mad, I can't deep dive into everything. It's so time consuming. But I am more... Oh, population issue. I've got you. Does that all play into the issue of the Carnegie Plan? Is that what you're talking about? Or the Carnegie Plan? However you pronounce it. And Iain said, we haven't, as a society, been the same since the onset of 24-hour news stations. Oh, that I've got it now. Shug, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that has been long deleted, right? And it was apparently a military guide, right? I've got you. I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, some of these things aren't quite what they claim to be, right? And it's very easy for people, like on social media, right? When they say, yeah, I know what this is about. This is about the Great Replacement Theory. Half the people who say this is the Great Replacement Theory have not even read it. Right, and that's one example, but you're absolutely right. I cannot do a deep dive on everything, but I am more than happy to when my viewers bring it up to my attention. Right, I'm more than happy to do it. Yeah, Shalini, TfL is bankrupt. I get the tube to work and other places. The trains are looking crap, dirty, along with the stations, buses all filthy too, all mismanaged. And honestly, Shalini, do you ever take the buses now? Because obviously they're primarily electric and the aim is for them all to be electric by 2030. There's that year again. And they're freezing. Yes, the Carnegie Plan, that's it. What's this? A few people I know keep getting ill. Stephen, what's this in relation to? But yeah, the buses, the London buses now, the electric buses, are freezing in winter and hot in summer. So they're not really working, right? And thank you, Tony, who shared a video with me at his local Morrison's. Of course, I had something to say and they told me it's for my own safety. And Tony videoed facial recognition cameras in Morrison's above the chiller, right? Where you see the milk and the juice. And he filmed it and then had some questions about it. Oh, people would die in droves. I sincerely hope not. Yes, I do. They're getting rid of, a couple of routes in my area. Yeah, they are. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous situation that they've got us in. And by the way, you know that new section we've got, he's a nonce and he works with children, which also can apply to women. But our new section, he's a nonce and he works with children, has been extended to, we have 90 nonces and they all work with children. I should repeat that. We have 90 nonces and they all work with children. It turns out that private tutors have been getting away with it for a very, very long time. A new study has been conducted, and actually it's a research report by the BBC, and it has concluded that more than 90 private tutors in the UK have been convicted of sexual offences. Let me just check that's all working and fine. Have been convicted of sexual offences against children and have carried on working with children. This Zoom thing keeps going up as well, doing its funny thing. Let me just check I've got it all right, and you all see me fine, can you, people? What is nonces? It's a prison term, and it's not on... Okay, I can't remember exactly what the acronym's for, but nonces is a term that is used these days to talk about paedophiles, but it's a prison term, and it's basically about not on usual exercise with everybody else because they're not safe to be around everybody else, or they're not safe because they'd be beaten up by other prisoners. Small number, absolutely. And part of the problem is, of course, is that private tutors, they're not subject to any of the same checks and balances that tutors in schools are, right? The Children's Commissioner for England is now calling, in light of these findings, for reform of the system. And the problem is that it doesn't require people offering private lessons to be checked before working with young people. Fairly astonishing stuff, isn't it? And there was research published in 2023 by the educational charity The Sutton Trust suggested that 30% of 11 to 16-year-olds in the UK had received private tutoring at some point. And teachers in schools must undergo enhanced DBS, which is disclosure and barring service background checks. But private tutors are not subject to the same thing. And the BBC have found a minimum of 90 nonces. Astonishing stuff. Not 19, Soul Sound, 90, 90. Patrick Neal says he's just glad that people witnessed last night that he's being stalked. I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm sure everybody else, maybe other people do. Now, MK Ultra, I want to say that. This is an assault on home education. This is a brilliant point. And I think I need to talk about this. I completely agree with you. And that is, here's the thing, is that Ed Balls did it before. Ed Balls, of course, is the husband of Yvette Cooper, who is the current Home Secretary. Ed Balls is a former MP, Member of Parliament, and he was also the Education Secretary at one stage. He was the Education Secretary when I was actually home educating my own daughter. And he was insisting that they were going to start having people coming into the homes of people. And of course, the problem is for the state, when it comes to home education, is that they cannot control these children in the same way. They cannot make them comply or conform in the same way. And so I do agree with you, MK Ultra. It's very interesting, isn't it? Mrs. Pirate wants to know if they all worked at the Beeb. Very interesting. And so that is actually what they claim. Over the last 20 years in the UK, 92 private tutors have been convicted of sexual offences involving children. And I mean, that's likely to be a gross underestimate. And I'm not saying that home education shouldn't be subject to checks and balances, because I believe it should be. But it has to be appropriate checks and balances. Yes. Yes, Jan. Ed Ball's regular visitor to the Bilderberg meeting. Absolutely. And Hope Education and private school, they don't have the control and they don't like it. MK Ultra, home educated. I've home educated my son. He is a well-rounded and happy lad. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all. So I only did just a couple of years home education with my daughter. She went to primary school. Throughout primary school, I gave her the opportunity to leave at any moment and be home educated. She stayed in the system. And then at the end of primary school, we opted her out for a couple of years. And then when she was 13, she decided that she wanted to go back into the system again. That was absolutely fine. That was her choice. But are around when their children are receiving home tuition, says Kat. So yeah, I think that is an excellent point that Em has brought to us, because there is a consistent attack on home education, and one has to ask, why did the BBC suddenly decide to do this research? And I think that is a really fair point that is being said in the comments there. What else we got? Keep your children close, says Randy. Yes, please do. And talking about the BBC, by the way, they are promoting the insect diet. You do realise that, right? They're definitely promoting the insect diet. Let me, can you see this? And this is from a very real menu. And so this weekend, the BBC asked, would you eat insects if they were tastier? I don't know what to say about that. Would you eat insects if they were tastier? No, I wouldn't, because I don't eat animals. But it turns out that some people would. And this was, so it turns out, right. So what happened, basically, there were 600 scientists in Singapore, and they were at an Insects to Feed the World conference, right? And here's what's interesting, was that there was an insect buffet, and then there was a regular buffet. Guess which buffet these scientists almost all went to? Because it wasn't the insect buffet that they were there to promote. So that is very interesting. According to the BBC, 2 billion people already eat insects. I don't know if I believe that. That's about a quarter of the world's population, if we're to believe that there are indeed 8 billion people on this planet. And that is actually according to the United Nations, who, of course, very difficult trusting them at all, because United Nations is behind the 2030 Agenda 2030. But the reality is, the regular buffet, right, Shalini? And that is exactly where the scientists went to, even though they were at a conference to promote eating insects. So there are some countries, like Singapore, recently approved 16 types of bugs, including crickets, silkworms, grasshoppers and honeybees as food. Eat the bugs, says Drumstick. And then you have a handful of countries, which also actually includes the European Union, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea and Thailand, that are regulating what is still an incipient edible insects industry. Estimates vary from $400 million to $1.4 billion that they will make from the eating insects industry. Okay? And the scientists who have been working on this, so the chef behind this recipe that you can see on the screen, said it took work to mask the earthy smell that accompanies all the insects. I mean, doesn't that make you want to just chuck? Right? They are claiming in this BBC article that insects are said to be a valued food source, right? And I mean, historically, there are countries like, for example, Japan, who have eaten grasshoppers and silkworms and wasps. They were traditionally eaten in kind of landlocked areas where meat and fish was scarce. So people have eaten that. And, and there are different palates all around the world. For example, it's absolutely a French delicacy to eat frog's legs, but not in the UK. So you do allow for all of that as one example, but we all know that there's an agenda behind it. And the thing is what they're going to do is they are just going to keep working away and chipping away at people's attitudes, because all they have to do is change people's attitudes. That's all they have to do. They change people's attitudes, and they will have people treating this as gourmet food in no time at all. We'll confess to eating some humbugs, says Condemned. Buy local peeps and eat seasonal. Mel's, that is a brilliant piece of advice. A brilliant piece of advice. So, in the comments, I want to know, have any of you ever eaten insects, and would you? Does this look scrumptious to you? Do you find this appealing? Can't beat a mint humbug, says Red Scotland. Miami Rose, butterflies matter. Gilly MC, so many ads today. They're shoving up a lot of ads because I'm on moderate. I'm on moderate for ads. Humphrey wants to know if it's going to be Sunday lunch, insect and 2 veg. George Kenley said Bush Tucker trial. See, George, this is one of the reasons I absolutely love having a live stream, because the live streamers, they prompt me onto other things. That is an excellent point, George. That was absolutely popularised, wasn't it, on I'm a Celebrity, the whole Bush Tucker trial, the whole idea, like eating sheep's doodahs and everything, right? And George is absolutely right. Look at that. They've already popularised it to a degree. They literally have already kind of sold the idea and made it. You know, the thing is, it's only... Nothing ever happens overnight. They do everything by stealth, as we know. They've microchipped the dogs now, right? It's only a matter of time before we're going to be microchipped. Humphrey would rather starve. Crazy Bunny was hungry before, but not now. Okay, got you. Leave the bugs to Bear Grylls, said Red Scotland. I have just got an allotment. Go fresh. Robin, excellent. It's like living in that show every day to eat bugs and everything. No, thank you. Humiliation ritual, says Beyond Belief. It is, isn't it? It is, absolutely. I mean, it's just, there's something very, very sick about it. Very sick about it. Right, let me see what else we have got on the agenda today. I'm sure I've missed some things, so I'm going to go right back to the top of our stories and see what I'm missing. So don't forget, this week we've got 2 inquiries that are starting, and we are all asking, who the hell is Charlotte Owen, and why is Boris Johnson so keen on continually promoting her? The Lords are going to debate this horrendous axing of winter fuel allowance, which Labour already knew would kill people. They already knew before they announced it, right? So we know that as well from this week. I'm just doing a quick recce just to check that I have covered everything that I need to. I'm sorry we weren't able to get our guests on the screen today. I am sorry about that. That's it's annoying for me as well, people. But things will improve as we go. I promise. I absolutely promise. Now, I want to come to a viewer's email. Let me see. Where is it? If I can find it. If I can find it, lovely people. Oh, what's this? Oh, Carl. Good morning to Carl. Hello, Sonia. Was just listening to your live where you spoke of scaling the shadow side, and it reminded me of something I happened to overhear recently. A young man was conversing with someone on a telephone as I walked by. The person on the other end of the phone was obviously very stressed, and this young man's simple response was so profound, it really cheered me up, as I was feeling quite sorry for myself at the time. He simply said, all this stressing is negating all the blessings you have in your life. And he is absolutely right, of course. I know this from experience, and I think we're all aware of this on a fundamental level, or at least would be, if we could quiet our minds long enough to remember it. Well, while it would be folly to ignore the trials the world is currently going through, we must all be mindful of this simple truth at least once daily. Being aware of something gives us an opportunity to change it. And let's bear in mind 100% that stress is a killer, people. Stress is a killer. Carl goes on to say, however, if we allow it to become our sponsoring thought without at least a brief respite, we will remain in the pit ourselves. And that's the point. That's why I don't spend too much time on social media these days, because it's all doom, gloom, negativity, fear porn, fear mongering. Elon Musk absolutely promotes big anonymous fear porn, fear mongering accounts. Absolutely, they are given absolute precedence and priority on X. I can't speak for Telegram, I don't use it, but I can see on X that is what's happening. MK says be more rather than be less. But I do agree with Carl, and that is, he says, if you are so inclined, and I know that you are, it's much easier to help others out of said pit when you're stood on the precipice than it is when you're way, way down there with all those who want to help. Anyway, please don't ever stop, Carl said. I, of course, know that you never will. It's why you came after all. Absolutely. Absolutely, Carl. It absolutely is. And it is really important that we keep our vibrations up. Can you imagine that when I was at TNT, I was told not to use that expression, keep our vibrations up, that it was icky, that it was kind of woo-woo. I was literally told that at a free speech station. Right? Don't use that expression, keep your vibration up. Well, I'm repeating it constantly. We have to keep our vibrations up because they are absolutely determined to bring us down. That is the reality, which is why I asked what I asked on social media yesterday. And I'm asking you now in the comments, right? And that is, what do you consider to be the meaning or meanings of your life? And I kind of put it on a very personal level because obviously there is the big question of what is the meaning of life, and many people say it is kind of like intimacy and being together and communication and being in the service of everybody. And I agree. I think those are the meanings of life, and procreation, obviously, that's another one. But then we have all the individual meanings of life. What does life mean to you? What meaning do you bring to your life? Tell me, lovely people. What? Milford said the word Jesus is banned on radio. I can't believe that. That can't be right. Now, one of the reasons why I'm pondering this is I wonder if I can just bring these up on the screen. I want you to see something. This is a group of my friends who I reunited with on Saturday. And I've known these people. Dave VJ was on with us recently, a DJ, and he was on with us recently. And Dave was the very first person who gave me my break in radio. Zar is next to Dave VJ. There's, of course, me. And then there's Caroline Peed. And these are people that I met during my hip hop time. And that was 30 years ago. 30 years ago. But we all met up this weekend and had a good old chat, and it was absolutely wonderful. And Crazy Bunny, I love these people. I love them so much. Friends reunited. And lovely Zar bought me those flowers in the background. She specifically made sure there was a sunflower because she says I'm a Leo. And but they made me think about the meaning of life, because the thing is that being around them, I literally can 100% be myself. And it's not that I'm not myself. It's just that, you know, sometimes you're in the company of people and you're very kind of like conscious of being there, not with them. They and we've all seen each other at our best and at our worst. And we still love each other regardless. And that's one of the wonderful things about it. So it got me thinking about the meaning of life. It is, yes, Fox, part of the hip hop gang. Yes, it is. But it got me thinking about the meaning of life and whether it is just a kind of a random set of circumstances that brought us here and will eventually take us out of this world, or is there actually more to it? And when I was studying psychology and sociology, we were taught about the Thomas Hobbes book, Leviathan, and in which he had a very famous quote where he had described life as nasty, brutish, and short. And that was actually in relation to poverty and war. But I'm going to read you part of the quote because I think it's a really interesting one. Let me just pick up a point that makes absolute sense. Let me find it. Let me find it here. Whatsoever, therefore, is consequent to a time of war, where every man is enemy to every man, the same is consequent to the time wherein men live without other security than what their own strength and their own invention shall furnish them withal. In such condition, there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is of uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth. It's a long quote. I'm not going to read it because it's a lot of oldie English words anyway. But the point being is that Hobbes viewed life in 1651 as nasty, brutish and short. And that was the life for men and women. Now, there has to be more to life than it being nasty, brutish and short. There has to be. And so for me, the meaning of life is in the kind of communications that I have with other people, being of service. When people come to me and I'm able to help them, that gives me a marvelous sense of well-being. It gives meaning to my life. And so I did ask on Twitter what people thought about that. And I asked on Instagram as well. And so let's have a look at this, because the thing is, when you say to people, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of your life? What meaning has life brought to you? It's a small question to a potentially huge answer. And it's also relative, because what brings meaning to you might not bring meaning to me. For example, football may be your religion. Going to the games brings unity with other like-minded people. It may have its own form of spiritual connectiveness for you that I don't feel, because football means very little to me. I see it largely as a distraction, but that doesn't mean I'm right or that it is meaningless. And that's the thing. Individual meaning is, I think, every bit as important as to the big overarching question of what is the meaning of life. Other things have more meaning to me, bring meaning to my life, such as music. Through music, I've been better able to understand the world and myself. Music has helped me to nurse a broken heart when I felt despondent with life. I've been comforted with music, which has been inspired by people who have been in a similar position to what I was experiencing at that moment. It creates a oneness that we all go through, of a kind of similarity, a shared experience, no matter our age, religion, culture, nationality, or our sex. So those are the individual meanings for me. So anyway, I asked people on social media and the meaning in their lives, and Craig Campbell had literally just touched down after a week in Spain and said, the meaning of life, just as I touched down after a week away. Thanks, Sonia. Right? Sean Parker said, doing what you love while balancing that with the needs of those you care about. Plus, the 70s albums of David Bowie. CJ, Just Claire, said, to love and to be loved. And that sounds simple, but that's actually really hard for many people to achieve. Kenneth, you're talking about the kind of spirituality of a Sunday. Attending the mall and the supermarket has replaced attending the church on Sunday. Cavan said music keeps the soul healthy. Eric says without music life would be a mistake. Iain's mood is lifted by Liverpool FC, and Timmer loves football and music. And that is the thing, is what is bringing meaning to your life. That's what's important, right? Now I like Richard Gill's response, said, it has no meaning in itself. You are the one who has to give it meaning. The purpose is to learn about life by living it in the right way and teach what you learn to others, if only by example. Graham Kemp said, an eternal quest to understand oneself, the world around us, and our place in it. And I think we should be given more time in our schools, in our education system, to ask these sort of profound questions, right? Because it's also formulaic, isn't it, in the school system? It's all about, reading, writing, maths. And there is more to life than all of those things. All of those things make life better, enhance life. But there are still other things to life that are important. And I was reminded of it, as I say, on Saturday when I met up with my old mates, and we could just very easily just discuss things and didn't feel judged about them. And that was also wonderful, that togetherness. And Belle says, love and laughter always. These are so contagious. Yep. Choose what music you listen to wisely. Wrong frequency and mainstream. Well, they do use certain frequencies, don't they? London Lady said motorcycles, camper vans, stone circles, wildlife travel, and tennis. Wonderful. Shug said, I took some wrong forks in the road to here. I don't believe you did, Shug. Not at all. I think, like we were saying last week, right, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, mate. I don't think you took wrong forks in the road at all. And Daniel said the meaning of life is to constantly strive to find meaning in your life. You specifically chose this incarnation. Why? Lots of love along the way, but most importantly, love thyself, says Daniel. And Daytime Pub Smell says salience is a mind state, an output of biological neural networks which evolved in a universe which has never not existed. So whatever triggers salience in your neural network is what has meaning for you. Meaning need not exist out there in some daft platonic sense. And Andrew said, in essence, I believe life is about the deepening of consciousness, and that this deepening of consciousness is the act of creation itself. Now, one of the reasons why I love asking that question, and I was talking about it with a friend, is it forces people to consider deeper meanings than what we're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we have to deal with such shallow things on a day-to-day basis, right? We're absolutely bombarded with mainstream media debates where they debate shallow nonsense. Stephen was a presenter on a community radio station until C19. I had a 70s music show. Sounds great. Scott Forbes says, the meaning is to fulfill your human potential. Well, that goes back to what we were also talking about before last week about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Iron Chimp said the meaning is to be fruitful and help others. And I don't think anybody can really deny that when you're in service of other people, unless you're a socio or psychopath, there is a sense of great well-being, right? There's a sense of great well-being. And Jim brings great humour to it, saying, get born, get drunk, get laid, get out. Fair enough. Fair enough. My meaning right now is the full bifter my daughter just made. Oh, Good Ship Lollipop is having a full English breakfast right now. And lovely Abby Wynn, who was on with us recently, said the meaning of life to discover who and what we are and to become fully sovereign under God so we can remind other people of the same. The world seems to be designed to block this path, making it all the more challenging. But I feel we are making major breakthroughs every day. I agree. I'm tired of striving to find meaning. I'm just going to accept living as myself is the meaning. HK, that is perfect. There should be no striving taking place here. Jilly finds sewing and photography, birds and nature, my family and my husband to bring great meaning. Real News says your state of consciousness, wherever it goes and whatever it believes. And Adam says brief moments of enjoyment intertwined with coffee and chocolate in memorable locations. So I think what I want to say here is in line with Professor Richard Gill, and that is we ourselves bring meaning to our lives, how we go about our lives. And the light is the reincarnation cycle, apparently. So one must question going towards the light. Curious, isn't it? We're always told about that, isn't it? About going towards the light. As long as you are happy with the life you're creating, nothing else matters. And that, bring it back to yourself. That's exactly what we do here on this show. We always bring it back to ourselves. Somebody's knocking on my door. Well, they can jolly well wait. Yes, they can. And I'm going to end with a quote. And that is from Anne Nin. And I love this. There is not one big cosmic meaning for all. There is only the meaning we each give to our life. An individual meaning, an individual plot, like an individual novel, a book for each person. That's right, people. Your life is a book. Carry on living it, carry on leading it, and one day, hopefully, we will read it. I want to thank you all so very much for being here today, even as I'm gradually getting used to what I'm having to get used to with this production unit. Thank you very much for your patience. I truly appreciate it. Yes, we're ending, Hugh. Absolutely. It's 11:08. I keep trying to end at 10:30. That is generally the aim for this show. Still miss broadcasting. What's that? Cheers all, says Hoax. Pass on your life lessons so your next generation can survive through their life. Thank you, Strictly Platinum. Thank you, Chella. Top show, Sonia. Many thanks, my girl. Thank you, darling. Thank you. You're welcome, Kenneth. Thank you for the encouraging, uplifting broadcasts. Thank you, Julie. Much appreciated. Toodles, says Flicking. Thank you, London Lady, Shalini, The Blue Nomad, Drumstick Jam, Priscilla, Choose Life, HK Very, Laid Back Media, Colin Guthrie, Robin Hunter, our lovely mods, Soul Sound and Crazy Bunny, Shug, Catherine, and Catherine wants to wish everybody a great week ahead. Hope everything's all right for you, Kath, and your mum. And bye, says Good Ship Lollipop. Thank you, Randy. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Jilly and Ozone and the Wizard's Words and Healing the Silence. I will see you again on Friday, where hopefully we will have less technical hitches. Katie, happy Monday. And to you, Jeanette and Ian and Merv and all of you. Have a brilliant Monday. Have a brilliant week. Stella wants me to aim for 11:30. You people are terrible. You really are. You're terrible influence on me. Take care, says Choose Love. Have a brilliant week, everybody. Love you lots. Thank you all always for the support and for making it possible for me to have a new production unit that eventually will give us exactly the show that we want. Okay? Love you all. Take care. Have a brilliant week. See you Friday. Take care.